with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes. Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to everyone listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you may be. My name is Joe DeMare, and I am here with the birthday girl,
Rebecca Wood.
Yes, who is celebrating a birthday on our very special episode of For a Green Future.
I'm old enough to get into senior housing now. But not to get Social Security. This is my last chance to be too young for anything.
Okay.
Is right. That. And after that, there's no more being too young.
Yeah, no more excuses. Sorry. Of course, being too old is a good excuse for a lot of things.
There we go.
So,
yeah.
All right, just transfer from one into the other. All right, and hopefully you'll join us on our special episode where at some point you can call and wish Rebecca a happy birthday at 877-909-1007, or you could send a text to 419-973-5841. I'm sure Rebecca would appreciate any and all birthday wishes here on For a Green Future. And for those of you just tuning in, For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment. We talk about them in the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the age you're going to live to, and things of that nature. And we've got a great show lined up for you today. We're going to have a guest calling in at 10:15. Our good friend Diane D'Arrigo is going to join us with an update on what's going on with the Biden infrastructure plan, because he has been planning to dump billions and billions of dollars into the black hole of nuclear power in order to push climate things. And if you're an environmentalist, you know that's a dead end, and many environmentalists know that because NIRS, Nuclear Information Resource Service, that Diane works for, has done an amazing job of getting this coalition of organizations together to oppose nuclear power in the infrastructure bill. But she'll tell you all about that about 10:15. Then we'll hear from our wonderful advertisers and patrons. And then Rebecca has a little report here. Since it's her birthday, she decided to do a report on
the military-industrial complex environmental effects.
Yeah.
I just said some words.
Yeah, and they made sense.
Okay, good.
Okay, yeah, which is an interesting topic. Then we're going to hear environmental news and information, the kind of stories you don't hear anywhere else. And there's a couple of them in today's that you won't hear anywhere else, but there's also a few that familiar stories by now that you'll hear from a fresh angle. And as I said, hopefully at some point we'll be hearing from you. So give us a call at 877-909-1007. And then, as I understand it, there's going to be some football coming after the show. So those of you who are am I incorrect on that, James? Yeah. Okay. All right. So those of you who are tuned into the station for the sports, don't worry. Sports are coming back. We're only going to be here for an hour or so talking about ecology and the environment. But I think you'll enjoy it, so just stick around.
And then the smashing and bashing.
Yes. And so one of the things I wanted to talk about today in our little intro part here, where we just sort of chat for the first 15 minutes or so, is sources. Who do you trust for the news and environmental news and any kind of news?
A timely question.
Yes, and how do you know you can trust them or not? And one way you know if you can trust a source or not is if they make corrections when they make mistakes.
Indeed.
Yeah, and so in that vein, we actually have a couple corrections. A few weeks ago, we did a report on a caterpillar that can cause you injury if you pet it, a pretty yellow caterpillar. And we identified that as the Dagger wing moth caterpillar. And that was actually incorrect. It's the Dagger moth.
But still really do not pet them.
Oh, yeah. We were right on about the poison
yes.
and the rashes and all that
Which I feel
stuff.
like is the most important part of this segment.
So we got the most important part right. But
yeah.
It was just dagger moth instead of dagger wing moth. There is a dagger wing butterfly, which is unrelated. But the dagger moth actually looks like... It's got a little pointy thing at the end of its nose, so it actually looks like the tip of a dagger. So
cool.
That's one. And the other is Hercules was not one of the Perseids. We were incorrect on that.
Oh, no.
Yeah, sorry about that. So I know those of you that follow along with your mythology books on your laps were probably fuming at that one, but now we've corrected it. So
thank God, yeah.
But it's important to correct things when you make mistakes because
this heads off the thousands of complaint messages that we would have got otherwise.
Yes. Yeah, I know. That's a big relief. I was dreading that. Opening the email, and anytime you do have a complaint or believe it or not, a compliment, you can send it to Joe at joe.demare4agreenfuture.org. That's Joe at DEMAREFOR agreenfuture.org. So we enjoy getting any kind of emails, actually. So go ahead and send them. But back to this question of do you trust a source or not? Now, every source is going to get things wrong sometimes. It doesn't matter if you're the New York Times or Fox News, you're gonna make mistakes. And the question is, do you admit them? And right now, there's a tremendous question in this country about can we trust what the government says about the COVID situation? And there are people who trust everything the government is saying. They just say, okay, that's what the government's saying. It must be true. And then there are people who trust nothing that the government is saying, so it's like if Fauci says it, it must be wrong. And I have to point out to those people that if you disbelieve everything from a source, you are actually more manipulable.
There was a very good quote that somebody said in answer to another post about vaccines or something. I can't even remember now, but somebody commented, well, if the government lied all the time, then it would be easy to tell when they're telling the truth, what the truth is.
Right, exactly.
Unfortunately, they don't.
That's the problem. I mean, yes, right.
Sometimes the government says stuff like the sky is up and the grass is down, and it's actually true.
And it is true. So keep that in mind, that truth is out there. I mean, there is a truth. I mean, I was last night, I actually, for the first time this summer, managed to pull the telescope out, and I was looking up, and I was looking at Jupiter and the moons, and I could see the little bands, and I was watching Saturn, and the rings, and it was really clear. I could see the nice gaps in between the rings and the planet, and
it was Saturn's day yesterday.
Oh, was
Saturday?
It? Oh, well, that must be what. Why I had this overwhelming urge to pull out the telescope finally. I've been meaning to do it all summer because Jupiter and Saturn.
As opposed to the other hundreds of Saturdays that you've had that telescope and not done it. All right.
Right, yeah. But, just like there really are planets, that you're taught that in science class, and guess what? It's true.
Yep.
Get a telescope and you can see them for yourself. That there really are things that the government has been saying about this epidemic, this endemic, that are true. But again, you can't accept everything because it's clear now in retrospect that the government made a tremendous mistake back a few months ago when they said vaccinated people no longer have to wear masks. Because what that did was the vaccinated people stopped wearing masks because, why they're not comfortable. No one enjoys, well, few people enjoy wearing masks. But the people who never wore masks, of course, apparently the government thought that they would start wearing masks because they told the people who were vaccinated, you don't have to, but you folks who aren't vaccinated, you need to start wearing them. And they thought that was going to work. And instead, of course, what happened is nobody wore masks. And here's where knowing biology and knowing the truth is. And so if nobody's wearing masks, then the rate of transmission is just going to go through the roof exponentially. I mean, if you know science, that's what you knew was going to happen. So that's a point where you can ignore that. You needed to ignore what the government said and continue wearing the mask. And I admit I sort of half did and half didn't. I put it on when I go in someplace, but I wouldn't wear it all the time. And you know, even though part of me nagging was back there saying,
yeah,
this isn't right.
Sometimes I'd just forget, and I'd get to the convenient mart, and I'd be like, I'm going in.
Yeah, they said we could.
Yeah.
And, you know, you want to trust people when they're telling you something you want to do. Like, you know, that you can have that 12th beer. I know you can handle it. Yeah, but, you know, it's not always good. So you've got to have trust your own educated instincts. You know, don't just go by what you want to be true. You know, you have to know about how things get transmitted. You have to know about how viruses travel through the air, and then you can apply your knowledge and actually reject the authority figures when they're wrong. And that's a skill that you often need to survive in this society, because, you know, the authority figures are often wrong. I mean, they're right most of the time, but sometimes they don't get it right. And I personally think that this reopening the schools without mask mandates, I also think that's wrong. That's a mistake. I mean, kids, none of the children are vaccinated. You know, they have a 0% vaccination rate, and the new variants affect them just as much as adults and older people, like the original disease did. So, you know, if you have to make a decision concerning the safety of your children, this might be a case where you need to make your own decision and not just go with the flow on this. But
I don't know if I mentioned this before, but my mother claims that she was offered thalidomide when she was pregnant with me for morning sickness, and didn't take it, and now I do have these handy appendages. Yeah. So that was a case where that was a good idea. But okay, the consequences if she didn't take it was that she was going to upchuck more often, you know, not that someone was going to die.
Yeah. So your mother trusted her instinct in that case, and usually non-intervention is the better course, you know. But okay, it's a little different when, you know, you're just going by your own instinct and someone might die, you know. Yeah. Or you know, for complicated reasons, she had some degree of mistrust of the medical community, but I got all my shots. You know, I used to have a polio scar. It kind of went away because I'm the human Etch-a-Sketch. Oh, okay. But yeah, I mean, on the plus side, I didn't get polio or smallpox or any of that crap. So, you know, and that is a good point. That was an instance of the medical community getting it right. Yeah. You know, that's you know, and you see these memes. It's like, well, the people who offered us thalidomide are saying we should take this. Well, you know, nobody died and made them the Pope, but that doesn't mean they're wrong all the time. Right, and they stopped. When they saw that it was a mistake, they no longer offer thalidomide. Yes, you know? Yeah. And so, you know, I just wanted to reassure you that we, as a source, you know, here on For a Green Future, we always strive to give you the best possible information we've got. But we will make mistakes, you know. We're not 100%. Nobody and nothing is. So, but for the most part, you can trust us. Yeah, we say so ourselves. All right, and you can trust us to keep on top of stories that we've been following. And one story we've been following is Biden's infrastructure plan. And so today I invited Diane D'Arrigo, our frequent guest from NIRS, to come talk to us about that. So, Diane, are you on the line?
I sure am. All right.
Well, thanks for joining us again. And let's see. Let's dive right in here. So, real quick, who are you with, and what do you do?
My name is Diane D'Arrigo. I am the Radioactive Waste Director at Nuclear Information and Resource Service, NIRS, and everything that I'm talking about today is on the NIRS NIRS website, www.nirs.org. And you wanted me to talk. So I've been with NIRS for quite a long time, and we track nuclear power, nuclear waste, radiation, and clean energy replacements for nuclear energy. And I'm on today to alert you that the federal legislation underway right now has terrible, huge, massive subsidies to keep old, dirty, decrepit nuclear reactors continuing to operate at our expense, our taxpayer expense, when they should be replaced with clean renewables.
Yeah, it's never been more practical to replace nuclear power with clean renewables than it is right now. In fact, in 2020, renewables actually provided more electricity than nuclear power did, and so that was a huge milestone. I'm hearing some very worrying things. Someone from Greenpeace called it the Exxon infrastructure bill. I've heard that it cuts renewable tax credits, renewable energy tax credits. So can you dive in a little bit here, Diane?
Okay,
yeah.
I will tell you what is going on that I am aware of. We're trying to track it as best we can with regard to nuclear power in the BIF, Bipartisan Infrastructure Framework, or we hear about it on the news as the Bipartisan Bill, and also in the Reconciliation Bill. So there are two legislative tracks that are underway right now. There's two bills, basically. One is the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, and for those who are possibly taking notes, that's H.R. 4024 and S. 2291, and those are a manifestation of the American Jobs and Families Plan out of the White House. And then there's also there's the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill that has already passed the Senate, and then there's the Reconciliation Bill, which is a larger $3.5 trillion bill that covers probably 8 or more of the federal agencies and the federal budgets, and it is a directive to those agencies on how to proceed with their budgets. And so the reconciliation bill is the one that is the reconciliation advice passed the Senate, but not the whole bill. So the budget, they call it the reconciliation budget, but it's advice to all of the Energy Committee, the Agriculture Committee, all the different committees to come up with and how to come up with the budget for next year. And what this does is it would be a budget for the next 10 years. So what we're looking at with regard to nuclear in both of these together is in the range of a federal bailout of about $50 billion to nuclear. And this $50 billion subsidy, however, would not go just across the board to all the old nukes. It would actually go to the least competitive nukes, the ones that are merchant owned. So there are nuclear power reactors in the country that are owned by utilities, and as their costs go up, they charge their ratepayers more. There are merchant owners of nuclear reactors, ones that are like Exelon and Entergy, that are companies that own reactors, and then they contract to send their electricity to the utilities. They do not have the ability to charge ratepayers when their costs go up. So it's those guys, it's some of those merchant owners who would be subsidized by this bailout money.
So these are the least profitable nukes. In other words, the ones most likely to shut down on their own. And Biden is basically stepping in with $50 billion and saying, no, don't shut. Here, money.
That's right. So in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, which, as I said, already passed the Senate, there are $6 billion in nuclear subsidies, and those are... that's for the existing nuclear reactors. It also has $5 billion for new reactors, new reactors that are just in their early design stages, some that are trying to go to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. But these new reactors they really are not new ideas. Many of them are old ideas that have failed in the past, and they still are going to make nuclear waste. In fact, they're going to require reprocessing some of them for their fuel. So the new reactors are not a panacea. The new reactors should not be subsidized, and there's no way that they can come online in time to help with our immediate climate crisis that we face, where we've got just a few years, maybe a decade, to turn things around. There's no way these reactors can come online in time for that.
Yeah, I think that's been proven pretty clearly time and again, because they're still working on the Vogtle reactors, which are now like how many years behind? They're like 10 years behind schedule.
The only reactors in the U.S. that are under construction are the current design. There's 2 nuclear power reactors being built in Georgia, Vogtle, and I don't know how many years or billions of dollars behind off the top of my head, but it was just announced recently that once again they're billions of dollars over budget, and it's going to take longer and longer if they ever do operate. There were 2 others that were under construction in South Carolina that got canceled. So it's a big loss to the people who were paying into the South Carolina utility ratepayers that were paying for those 2 reactors that got canceled. But they're not going to lose nearly as much as the Georgia ratepayers because the Vogtle reactors continue. So anyway, going back to the 2 tracks, and the reason why your listeners need to pay attention here is that every single one of you needs to call Marcy Kaptur's office. Your representative, Marcy Kaptur, from that area, from your area, is a key decision maker on the appropriations. She is the chair of the appropriations subcommittee on energy, and she will be part of all negotiations between the House and Senate. She has historically been very pro-nuclear, and my expectation is she will continue to be so. However, she does need to have fiscal responsibility, and the reality is that some of these subsidies, either the $6 billion in the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the $50 billion in the reconciliation bill, these would subsidize some of the corrupt companies that you have highlighted on your show, the corruption in the nuclear, in the Ohio legislature and in the nuclear industry in this region over previous calls. And these subsidies would award all of those companies, those same people with subsidies that they do not deserve.
Yeah, so, let me jump in here for a second, Diane, and just say Marcy did have a brief anti-nuclear window when they had the hole-in-the-head accident at Davis-Besse that nearly turned her legislative district into a radioactive wasteland. For a couple of years there, she was like, you know what, maybe nukes aren't such a good idea, but she got persuaded the other way. And that is an excellent point, that it's like we had incredible corruption here at the state level, and people are going to jail now because of that and paying huge fines, and it's almost as if the federal government stepped in and said, "Hi, you were thinking about state level corruption. We've got billions to pass out here at the federal level." But you folks, I wanted to ask you actually. Before we leave Marcy,
okay. It's kaptur.house.gov is her website, and from there you can send her an email message.
Yes.
So kaptur.house.gov and 202-225-4146, I'll repeat it again later, is the direct line to her Washington office.
Yeah,
and you need to call and email and say no to nuclear subsidies, and they need to be kept out of the the sausage making that's going on right now. They say that making law is like making sausage. We are in the sausage making stage. And if we wait until the final decisions, the final bills come to the floor of the House and the Senate, it will be too late, because there's going to be too much rolled into all of this huge $3.5 trillion budget that could come down before the end of the year for any legislator to vote no. Even if they are anti-nuclear, they're not going to be able to vote no on the whole thing. So she needs to hear the pressure now while the sausage is being made. Sorry for interrupting you. Please go ahead with what you were.
Well, yeah, and actually that ties in with what I was going to ask, because I understand you folks have done kind of an amazing job of rounding up other organizations to essentially oppose nuclear in the infrastructure. Wasn't there recently?
Yes, yeah. We just sent a letter with nearly 250 organizations to the House and Senate leadership and to the president and vice president, basically saying no to these provisions. It's actually a 4-page letter that outlines why nuclear should not be included in the bipartisan bill and in the reconciliation bill. And if you want, at some point, I could go into a little more detail of how they're doing those amounts, but that's essentially it. We're looking at basically $10 to $50 billion of infrastructure spending on aging, uneconomical nuclear plants. It's costly, it's counterproductive, it's job killing, and it only, actually, one of the other things I wanted to point out is that there are really 33 of our nearly 100, we've got in the high 90s, number of nuclear reactors still operating in the U.S., although some are closing all the time, or would close without these subsidies, there are 33 reactors at 19 sites in 8 states that would qualify for the proposed $50 billion bailouts. They're owned by only 8 large companies, and as the entire $50 billion, or 94% of the subsidy, would go to these 8 corporations. And some of those, let's see, I'm going to get you the information here. Over $35 billion of the bailout, 70% of it, would go to just 3 corporations: Exelon, Energy Harbor, and PSEG. So there are reactors, a few reactors would get the benefit. And the other thing about this money that's going to nuclear, it means less money is going to the real solution to climate change. So not only does nuclear make climate worse, not really help, it actually is stealing money that could go to renewables and efficiency and the true solutions to climate change. And then, as I said, Exelon and Energy Harbor, which are 2 of the companies that would get over 50% of the bailout money, are the subjects of federal corruption cases, over $1 billion in nuclear bailouts, for which they bribed state legislators in Illinois and Ohio. So this is not only making the climate problem worse, it's feeding the corruption.
Yeah, and
it's taking away jobs, and a dollar spent on nuclear would go much further. It'd do many more jobs in the other fields. If
we put up wind and solar, yeah. I mean, Energy Harbor, that is the company that owns our local nuke plant, Davis-Besse, and I don't think I'm in danger of any lawsuits when I say Exelon and Energy Harbor are 2 of the most corrupt corporations in America, because I think you can look at this in terms of court cases and numbers of percentage of people that are getting accused of crimes, and they're pretty bad. Of course, Energy Harbor will claim that they were First Energy at the time all the corruption was happening, but that I don't think...
you changed your name. Clearly, you're not. That absolves you of everything. Alrighty.
Right. So
Energy Harbor could get $5.5 billion or 11% of the bailout, and Exelon would get, according to the scheme currently laid out, $24.5 billion.
And I think it's important to remember that nuclear power is kind of uniquely dangerous, and every minute they're operating, that we're actually in danger of losing the region that they're operating in. I mean, we just had Kevin Kemps on a few weeks ago because Davis-Besse nuclear power plant had a scram, and they had the feed water pumps got activated, and cold water got sent into the reactor core, and so there was potential for a huge we almost had another disaster, and these kinds of things can happen all the time. And one of my news stories, not to spoil it for everybody, but our other local nuclear plant close by is Fermi 2, and it's operating at 55% power right now because they had a huge unplanned emergency thing happen that they had to drop the power of the nuke plant. But all right, well, thanks so much for coming on and telling us about all this, Diane. And
well, be sure. I think it really will make a difference if people contact Representative Marcy Kaptur's office, either by email or phone or whatever mechanisms you have to contact your representative. NIRS, my organization, has a package of materials that we can share with those who are interested to help organize locally. And it's the end of the summer session where the reps, I think they may have even come back into session, but you can still use these materials to publicize, do letters to the editor, and we have alerts. If you go to our website, nirs.org, under there are a few banners that are going across, and you can click on the one that talks about the bailouts. Click on that, and it'll take you to actions, or you can click on the action tab and go to alerts, and you can send letters to your Congress members. And fortunately, you folks have a very influential Congress member that you can help really make a difference in the final outcome of all of this.
Yeah, and it's important to note that Ohio right now is redrawing all its congressional districts. So if you're in the region but not quite in her district as it's currently set up, don't be afraid to contact her, because after the redrawing, she might be a representative. So everybody within our listening area
and she's got a role that's national. I mean, she's the subcommittee chair of appropriations, which is an extremely powerful committee in the final decisions with these trillions of dollars and these billions in nuclear bailouts. So we all have a right to contact her.
All right. Well, and so let's do so. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dan, for coming on and giving us this update at what has turned out to be the critical time. So I guess that's about it. Any questions, Rebecca? Or?
I think not. Yeah, Diane is very, very clear about things.
All right, Dan. Well, thanks so much.
Thanks, folks. Glad you're publicizing it.
Yes, happy to do that, although unhappy that we have to, but happy to do it. All right, thanks, Diane. All right, so that was Diane D'Arrigo, and we're always happy to have her on. And again, back to that question of who could you trust, Diane D'Arrigo versus, let's say, some industry spokesperson. And I have to say, I've known Diane personally for decades, and the people who are working for organizations like NIRS, yes, they make their living by fighting things like nuclear power, but let me tell you, folks, they are not getting rich. This is not something that people are doing because they love the money. They're doing it because they love the people that they're protecting. Because had there not been organizations like NIRS and Beyond Nuclear and other environmental organizations, it's hard to imagine how much worse things would be right now. We might have, the way Nixon planned. We might have nukes, thousands of nukes, hundreds in every city. And as we now know, people would be suffering terrible effects from radiation exposure. So somebody who works for a company or an organization like NIRS, who's not making much money, but who's doing it because it needs to be done and they love to do it, I trust them more than, let's say, the spokesman for First Energy or Energy Harbor that says, we didn't do anything wrong, and then a year later said, okay, yeah, we bribed people, but is that wrong?
They changed their story quite a bit.
Yeah, so no, NIRS has been very consistent. So, all right, well, and someone else who's been consistent, another consistent part of For a Green Future have been our advertisers and patrons. Yay! For a Green Future is brought to you by the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They restore wildlife habitats, and they lead outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy, from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. And there's several ways you could check out what's going on at the Wood County Parks. One is to call them. Just call up and chat a little bit at 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. Another is to go to their website, wcparks.org. And you can also download their nifty app. Just go to any app store and search for WC Parks. And so that's the Wood County Park District, and we're very happy to have them on. And, of course, we're also brought to you by our patrons. These are people who've gone to patreon.com and signed up, and every week a little bit comes out of their checking account, comes over to us, and that's how we could afford to keep this show going. And we had last week, we had a couple new patrons come on, George and I'm sorry.
Wasn't me.
It wasn't you, no, but I was looking at you, so I said your name.
Right.
George and Beth. Beth and George are the ones that just signed up recently. And it would be nice to be able to announce a new patron every week. So, you'd get your name mentioned on the air, and you'd get thanked profusely for the wonderful person that you are. So consider becoming a patron of For a Green Future. Okay, now it's time for us to hear from Rebecca on her special birthday presentation. Go ahead, Rebecca. What are we talking about?
Alrighty. Well, for those of you who have been paying attention to Joe or in general, quick review, but you probably already know that the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change came out with a statement recently saying that it is now a certainty that global warming and the consequences will intensify severely over the next 30 years. It's going to happen. As part of this, it's expected that 1 billion people will be subject to life-threatening heat waves. Hundreds of millions will be subject to severe droughts. And then there's the hurricanes, of course. But if we can, the flooding, blah, blah, blah. But if we can cap the temperature rise at 1.5 degrees Celsius, it will not get even worse than that. I think even worse than that is probably life on Earth no longer possible.
Yeah, I think it's the society surviving line there is 1.5.
Right. It's not going to be good, but it's still survivable if we act very, very quickly. But, I read an article this week in Jacobin Magazine. The average person, you think, war, it's probably not great for the environment, probably knocks over some trees or something, But in fact, the U.S. military is the single largest industrial consumer of oil and gas in the world. They're one of the largest polluters worldwide, according to a report from Brown University. In between 2001 and 2019, the war in Afghanistan caused emission of 1.2 billion metric tons of greenhouse gases. In addition to massive deforestation and toxic burning of munitions. I can't say big words today. But the U.S. in fact, U.S. corporations do 37% of global arms trade worldwide. That includes $175 billion in arms to. Maybe it's only $1 million in arms to foreign countries. 24% of which goes to Saudi Arabia. Also, the U.S.-backed Saudi-led war in Yemen, in addition to setting up a humanitarian disaster which kills 1 in 5 children from malnutrition now in that country, there's also this unmaintained oil tanker that's blockaded into the harbor and has been there for 5 years with no maintenance. And they say if it blows, it'll be 4 times worse than the Exxon Valdez. Remember the Exxon Valdez? That wasn't good. A lot of dead birds. So yeah, in 2020, we sold $441 million in weapons to Israel. And in the 2021 attacks on Gaza, apparently in addition to 250 civilian casualties, we hit a pesticide factory and Gaza, some kind of warehouse for Gaza foam something, and which stores hazardous chemicals. So
well, Israel did it. We didn't. That wasn't our.
It's true. It's true. It's true. Yeah, it was just with our.
Yeah, they used our
money.
Weapons and money, but yeah, it was them.
It was them. It was definitely them. Yeah, but yeah, okay. And speaking of Biden's 2022 budget, this includes apparently $2.6 billion for intercontinental ballistic missiles, which don't do anything good at all for the environment. $5 billion for a nuclear submarine, $3 billion for B-21s, which uses as much fuel in an hour as your average car does in 7 years. $15.7 billion for nuclear weapons programs, $12 billion for F-35s. It's another number. F-35s, which, if one of those crashes, it's going to cause, quote, an inferno of greenhouse gas emissions. So, yeah, war in the military actually a pretty serious environmental problem. There are a lot of reasons to have or to not have wars besides the environment. I think the environment is a pretty significant reason, however. Mm-hmm. And in general, this is just some reasons why, as my mom's little pendant thingy she had with a flower on it in the 60s used to say, war is not healthy for children and other living things.
No, true. And, I always remember the statistic that, some of our worst cars get like 8 miles per gallon, some of the biggest SUVs. But a tank gets 8 gallons per mile.
Oh, boy.
And so just think of the tens of thousands of tanks that the U.S. has running all over the world, and every one of those is burning 8 gallons of gas every time they go 1 mile. So
wow.
And, of course, those ships, the huge battleships, just think of how much power it takes to move them and how much that translates into fossil fuels. Mm-hmm. And, we need to dial that back there. So... Okay, well, Rebecca, thanks for that important reminder.
Welcome.
And I just wanted to remind our audience that if they want to wish Rebecca a happy birthday or comment on anything they've heard so far, just give us a call at 877-909-1007 or send us a text at 419-973-5841.
And that's the end of the seriousness on my birthday. The rest of it's going to be fun and frivolous if it kills me.
Yes, okay. So, in that spirit, I'm searching for, trying to find a frivolous news story here. We're to our part of this show where we talk about ecological news. And, no, I'm sorry, Rebecca, I can't find it.
There's some very cute little pictures of wolf cubs online, I have to say.
Oh, yes, wolf cubs. This is the cub season, so that is cute. Let's see. So, unfortunately, I have to report some other things. One story that kind of slipped through a lot of news nets that I wanted to go back to and catch, because I did not know this. As I've been an environmentalist my whole life, I had thought we had beaten lead in gasoline. I thought that was okay. That was a victory. We're not going back. But it turns out, I did not know this all this time, that even though cars no longer use leaded gas, airplanes still do.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, and so all this time, airports have been using fuel full of lead. The Friends of the Earth, our friends at Friends of the Earth, have actually filed a lawsuit with the EPA saying, look, you got to start regulating the lead in airplanes. And they've done studies, and some children that live downwind from airports have lead levels as high as the children who were up in Flint, Michigan, getting exposed to all that lead in their water.
So maybe there's a reason why we have such poor analytical skills and poor emotional control regulation right now.
Yes. If you live anywhere near an airport,
that's not helping.
That could be part of it. And, I'm Italian, and the Romans went through this, okay?
Oh, yeah, lead.
Yeah, that was part of the reason
that wasn't good.
Our empire fell, is because we kept insisting on using lead plates because it made the food taste better, especially, you get that sweetness in the tomato sauce from lead that you can't get from anything else. But eventually caught up with us because people could not make good decisions.
Yes, indeed.
Because their IQs were getting suppressed because they were eating lead. And, that's just one factor, but... but all these factors do matter. It wasn't
helping. It really wasn't helping.
Did not help. So I'm very lead shy because, we could still have been in control of everything if we hadn't screwed up on stuff like that. Yeah. So hadn't deforested, hadn't eaten so much lead, et cetera, et cetera. All right. So, but it's good that the Friends of Earth, so this is kind of good because Friends of the Earth has finally filed a lawsuit and is now taking on the EPA about it. Ida, of course, Hurricane Ida is an ecological news story because this is a global warming hurricane. That this rapid intensification happens because it turns out the Gulf waters are about 90 degrees, and this 90-degree water goes to an unprecedented depth in the water. Usually it's just the top few inches that get that hot, but no, it goes way down. It's still 90 degrees.
Uh-oh.
And so... we're getting to the point where these incredible, terrible things are becoming almost normal. It's like we don't pay attention unless it's like the worst hurricane ever to hit someplace. But, we can't get complacent about this. We just have to realize that this is part of what's happening. We said it would happen. We've been telling you it would happen for over 40 years. Now it's happening. Again, there's another test. Can you trust someone? Well, if what they tell you is going to happen happens, maybe they know what they're talking about.
Yeah, that's a sign. We were talking on the porch this morning, and we were like, well, the good news is that we live in a place where everyone is going to want to live now because it's not on fire and doesn't have hurricanes. The bad news is that it's probably going to get too expensive for us to live here.
Yeah, I mean, the people that believe that the solution is to just run away and go to a safer place, but in the long term,
we'll have to find some nice place with a lot of hurricanes and fires.
Yeah, in the long term, no place is safe.
It'll be within our price range.
Eventually, those things will hit everywhere on the globe. So, okay.
And then in a minute, it won't matter anyway.
And then in the yada 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 camp, the Earth is still burning. There's incredible fires all over the planet right now. In light of Rebecca's birthday, I'm not going to list them all because it's just too depressing.
I already know it's depressing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fairy Creek, our friends up at Fairy Creek are continuing to battle the Royal Canadian Mountain Police. And it has become a huge issue in Canada because there's video after video showing the police using incredible violence against peaceful protesters. And it actually has reached the national election level. People like Trudeau and liberals are actually starting to pay attention. And the liberals were incredibly pro-logging, but now they're promising $50 million to save old growth in British Columbia. So it's become a campaign issue. The battle is still going. The protesters are still going out there. The police have broken up all their camps, but they're still continuing to operate without camps and just going straight to the front lines. So that battle is still waging. It's finally getting caught up by the Canadian mainstream media.
Because of their sacrifice, at least people are noticing a little bit now.
Right, and it's about to become the largest number of arrests in a civil unrest in Canadian history. 824 arrests so far, and if they pass 850, it's a record. Mm-hmm. So it is starting to get some attention to get caught up in the mainstream. So keep going, Fairy Creek people. We're with you. Another group that we're with is the Line 3 protesters trying to stop the tar sands pipeline in Minnesota, and they are also continuing to battle. And they've kind of moved their protests and their front lines. They're still doing some stuff at the front lines, but they've kind of moved their protests into the state capitol. And they had in this past week, they had 4 people arrested protesting the state capitol, where a bunch of indigenous people set up a prayer circle on the lawn of the state capitol, and they had teepees and they were doing ceremonies there. The police came in and busted them all up.
Okay, wait a minute. We still got the 10 Commandments on the corner of the courthouse lawn in Toledo.
Yeah, well, they didn't bust them up because they were doing ceremonies. The legal excuse was that their permit expired Thursday night, and they had other bigger protests coming in this weekend, so they had to clear them out to make room for the bigger protests.
Okay.
Yeah. Whatever, exactly. And 30 people have been arrested in front of the governor's mansion, because they've been protesting. It's the governor that could stop this with a one statement or phone call, and so that's where the battle has shifted from the actual pipeline places into the state capital of Minnesota. So we'll see what happens there. Furby 2, as I mentioned, we gave that little bit of foreshadowing. Furby 2 is currently at 55% power. As usual, they're not telling us why they had to, go to half power. Usually that means that something is going fairly wrong, and they might have to scram all the way, and they're being precautious, but again,
I think it's just cautious.
Yeah, it's just cautious.
But there should be a word precautious.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah. Well, but there is now.
Proactive. People are saying proactive.
Okay,
now.
Proactive.
That's the annoying corporate buzzword.
All they're telling us, the NRC spokesperson Victoria Mittling, who basically acts as a corporate mouthpiece for the Fermi plant, just all they'll tell us is that it's not on the nuclear side, it's on the generator side. So something's going wrong there. But I do want to point out that this has happened at the time of the year where we need electricity the most, because we're all roasting and everybody's got their AC going.
You're telling me our air conditioning was out for 3 days when it was over 100 this week. It was not good.
I know.
We were really afraid that our dog was going to die of a seizure.
Right. I mean, air conditioning has become a necessity. And so to have the plant is a 3.5 gigawatt plant. So to have a plant that size drop from putting out 3.5 gigawatts to only 1.7 gigawatts in the midst of the highest demand of the year can cause grid instability. That can cause the grid to crash.
But remember, we can't use wind and solar because they're not reliable.
Good point. Yeah, and along those lines, back to Ida, there's 2 nuclear power plants right in the path of Ida. And the NRC,
oh, crap.
The NRC sent out this reassuring tweet. Oh, we've sent observers into those plants.
Oh, good. Well, everything's fine now then.
Yeah, because there's NRC people watching, and they have magical powers, so they can stop things like, power outages. And
they're going to be like, oh, crap, there's a hurricane bearing down on the nuke plant. Well, thank you for that. Thank you, Captain Obvious.
Yeah, they could stand in front of the nuke plant with their staffs like Gandalf to stop the floodwaters and say, you shall not pass.
Boy, that's not a good job.
They announced this on Twitter, the NRC did, and so I just said back to them on Twitter, why don't you tell them to shut down as a safety precaution, ? Still waiting for the NRC's response to that. So far, they haven't responded. We'll see if they ever do. And I only had one other news story that I wanted to cover, and this one is kind of depressing. Sorry, folks. Guardian, the Guardian, the paper, The Guardian, has an article called "EPA is falsifying risk assessments." Apparently, for the past 5 years, the EPA has not denied any application for use of a new chemical, even though the scientists who work for the EPA have been raising all kinds of flags on a lot of them, because it turns out a lot of them actually do have health effects. Yeah. And according to the regulations, they actually should not have received approval. But apparently what's happened over the past 5 years is that the chemical industry has essentially captured the EPA, and now routinely the recommendations of EPA scientists are just tossed in the wastebasket, and approvals are pushed through in record time. They're trying to break the records all the time on that. And so it has now become a big scandal. There's an organization called PEER, which is made up of environmental protective employees that like they feel they can't come forward because they'll lose their jobs if they make public statements, but they go through this organization PEER, and PEER is saying it's a record number of whistleblowers that are saying,
wow,
this terrible chemical or that terrible chemical is getting through the regulatory process, and it shouldn't.
A whole symphony of whistleblowers, if you will.
Yes, and so there's something that hopefully our President Biden will do something about. I mean, the last administration didn't, but of course we have the Biden administration who hopefully will fix these sorts of things.
You'd think.
Maybe, hopefully.
We're told that they're better.
Yeah. As a Green, I don't have a lot of confidence in that happening, but I hope it'll happen. I mean, that's what's supposed to happen. Maybe it'll happen, and it's more likely to happen the more...
Go ahead, Biden, wow us.
Yes, impress us, please. But it's more likely to happen the more we all participate. So just as Diane D'Arrigo said, give a call to Marcy Kaptur, we're much more likely to save wind and solar power by keeping the money from going to nukes if a lot of people take up her request and make a call or a letter. And I can tell you from experience, one call or letter gets attention because they know that there's, for every one person who calls or sends a letter, there's 10 to 100 that have been meaning to do it but haven't done it. So
they know us.
Yeah, so give a call. Well, that's it for this show, our special happy birthday edition. So this is Joe DeMare
and Rebecca Wood,
and we are signing off.
But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do